today I will show you how to build this breeding base that I designed for Brontos in ARK Survival Ascended. So this Bronto breeding bunker is quite a big build, obviously, to fit those biggest creatures that you might want to breed, whether it's actually Brontos, the evil Bronto for myself, but even Gigas, Karchas and stuff like that will of course easily fit inside of the build. It is, however, a very big base. So if you're planning to build this on official, you will be able to. It is within the official limit. You'll just need to keep into consideration that you can't have any other big builds in the same sphere of the build limit, because the structure itself is very close to the official build structure limit. But if you just build it a little bit away from your base, or use this as your base for everything, you'll be good to go. And it will offer you an absolute ton of space for your breeding, both on the inside of the base, but of course also available on the roof should you need even more. Now, if you want to save on a few structures during the build process, I can definitely recommend building this bunker against a cliff, because then you won't have to actually build the back of the bunker yourself. You'll save a bunch of structures that way. It's what I did here in this original design. Hello there, survivors, and welcome back to another build tutorial here in ARK Survival Ascended. Today we're taking on this Bronto breeding bunker base, which is definitely a really cool design in my opinion. I love this brutalist architecture for an ARK base. It reminds me a lot of Jurassic Park, of course, which is the perfect blend if you're looking for a safe place to keep all of your tames, and in this case, do a bunch of breeding. I've used mostly the Bunker Structures Custom Cosmetics, which is a premium skin, but definitely well worth it in my opinion. But I've also used a few variants from the new EGM Sci-Fi Cosmetics, which is a really cool blend, especially these dark metal structures that fit very well for a bunker like this. For the rooftop, I've made it out of Deluxe Dream House. The hedge skin is absolutely perfect for it, but it also offers grass if you prefer that look, but you could switch it out for cozy cabins instead. Or of course, if you want to, you can switch out cosmetics altogether, build it out of different cosmetics, or even try to build it without it, because even in just, tech or metal, it will still look like a pretty cool bunker. As always though, if you enjoy seeing these types of build tutorials and you want to continue to see more of them, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate all the support, and of course you can also consider becoming a YouTube member if you want to support me even more. And before we dive into the build tutorial, feel free of course to leave your suggestions for future builds you'd really like to see down in the comments below. So to start out, what you want to build first is a pretty big foundation. It's going to be 25 wide and 37 long. So you'll need a decent flat area if you want to build this out of foundations. Definitely recommend doing that, because of course that will save you a lot of structures. For the original design that I did for the bunker, obviously I ended the bunker by attaching it into a cliff, so I didn't really need to worry about the design of the back of the bunker. There's a few options you could go for, of course. You could just build the front entrance on both sides. I'm going to show you something different in this tutorial, so you'll have a few options to choose and pick from, whatever works best for your situation. But in essence, it means you can build this base pretty much anywhere. So once we've built these giant foundations of 25 by 37, we need to make some additions on the side. I've already prepared them here on one side, and I'll show you how to do them here on the opposite side. So from the front corner, so let's say this is the front entrance of our bunker, we're going to go and count in by 7 in total. So we want to make sure that we have 7 of these foundations before we add another foundation. So there's 7 of them before we have this little addition. Then we want to count to 5, and after these 5 we want to place another foundation. So there's 5 in between these ones, and this time we want to extend this until it's 6 long. Then we want to leave a gap of 7, so just like this, and then another 6 poking out. And then in between these 6 foundations that are sticking out, we want to fill in the first 2 layers all the way through. So just from one side to the other. Then if it allows you, what you want to do is lower the foundations here. So you should be able to snap to half the foundation. You can also use like a little ramp or something to get the right snap point. If your landscape doesn't allow it, you can ignore this step for now. This is just to build the entrance, and we want to fill in the middle 3 and make those 2 wide. And then here in the corners, we want to expand this just like so and fill in those corners all the way. So we have some slightly lowered foundations if possible. If it won't let you do this because of the landscape, you don't really need to worry about this. We'll fix it up as soon as we start working on these entrances. And then over here on this side, we want to leave a gap of 5 before we place down another foundation, just as we did right over at the front. So these are the entire foundations that we'll need for this giant bunker base that is perfect for all of your different breeding projects. Pay attention to the entrances on the side at the bottom at the top. There's some lowered foundations there as well. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. It's not the end of the world if you can't do this due to your landscape. We'll get to why they are there and how to do this if you're not able to get those foundations synced down as we get to that part of the build. Now, if you're building this into the back of a cliff like I did with my original design, after this final foundation that we have sticking out, you want to probably have around 5 foundations of space before the cliff really takes over. But of course, the advantage of having a cliff at the back is you don't need to waste any structures on building the back of the base, as well as the creatures with long tails like Brontos. You can just kind of park them against the cliff and the tails can stick out into the cliff without any issues. It's time to start with the front entrance of the bunker. We're going to be building 3 hangar entrances right next to each other. Of course, if you really wanted to, I suppose you could take one out or maybe even add more to the side if you need even more space. Here on the front corner, we're going to go onto the right corner. We're going to go in by 4 before we place 3 foundations or 3 walls on top of these foundations to get a start. And in total, we can raise up these walls to be 4 high, just to get a little bit of a grasp of how big this needs to be. We can then go around the corner here, place 1 wall there, place another one here, and then have a gap of 7 in total. So we just want to make sure that we have 7 of these walls in total before we come out in front again. So basically kind of repeating that shape we had over there. So we have one of the potential entrances right there, then we have another gap of 7 right here before once again we build out like this, and that means that will be the second entrance. And then finally we can have another 7 walls right over here before we once again come out like so. And here on the side, of course, we have these 3 walls that we can raise up to be 4 high in total. Now, on top of these walls here at the side, we want to snap in some large walls. So in total, these will be 8 high now, with the top 4 being the large walls to save on some structures. And if you're going to use the bunker cosmetic, they're going to look really nice with some nice details on there. For the next step, we're going to start right here on the corner. We're going to flip around this roof and we're going to add 6 of these coming out like so. So we want to make sure that this goes up by 6 in total, and we'll do that for each and every one of these little additions that we've made that are sticking out here on the front. So again, 6 of these roofs is what we want to have, and that should all be supported by the foundations that we've placed down below. So we want to make sure that we add these in everywhere. We want to raise up them by 2 and then go out 1 here on the corner. Then we can of course bring this all the way across until we meet up with the next one, and then keep this going all the way connected back up, and then once more of course to this final one. And also here We want to make sure that it sticks out by one on the very corner, and this is going to help us shape up the entrance here of the main bunker. You can already start to see it a little bit of what the exact shape will be. Then here along the inside, we want to make sure that we add these ceilings behind these walls. So 7 of them here, and then another 7 right over there, and finally another 7 at the third entrance here. We then want to take out our pillars. We want to go in by 1 and place 5 pillars on top of each other there, and we want to have another 5 right over here. We can do this for every entrance. So once again, 5 pillars and another 5 right over there, 1 from the very corner of each of these entrances. So we'll do just this to make sure that we got the frame for the entrances in there. Now, after we've done that, we should be able to take out our behemoth cellar doors. I like to use the metal ones. And then we can go for the hangar door. So that's the second variant. And we can place 1 in there between the pillars. It should snap. Then we have another one here in the middle. And finally, the third one. And this will allow us to use this as the main entrances. Because as you will see, once you open this, this should give you a nice ramp to get in and out of your build. Whereas it is closed, there's no way to get in at all, which is a quite nice way to utilize these. And even though they might not look like it, they are big enough for most of your biggest creatures. So Brontos, Gigas, and Karchas will easily fit through these gates. Along the side, we want to raise up these walls by 1 more. So first we'll go around all of these entrances to add in 1 extra wall. And then above that, we want to add in a large wall, which should then reach to the top of these gates we've just placed down. So we want to make sure that we do that for each and every one of these to fit in these entrances a bit more. As we continue these entrances, we want to raise up this wall by 3 high here above the front gate. So we're going to do this for each section. So 3 high walls there, and then 3 high walls every gate that we have. There we go. Keep this pattern going. So that will be sure that everything is completely filled in by the end. Let's take out our ramps, and then from the top of the pillar here that we have next to the gate, we want to raise up 4 ramps just like this. We can do the same thing over here for this corner too. And obviously we can once again do this for every entrance that we have built. So 4 of these ramps coming from the top of this pillar outwards to the front. So once more, 4 of them just like that. And then we can take out our ceilings, and we should have 3 layers of ceilings until we reach the front. We can actually do this for the entire front here, so that we connect up with the second layer of those ramps. We can do the same obviously for all of these entrances. So all of them are going to get this same look, which should attach to the line of walls that we already have in place. So this is going to help us make sure that this entrance looks the best it can do. So there we go. That is the start for these entrances. Then finally, here in the middle, we want to make sure that we have 2 layers of these ramps going all the way across. So we want to do the top 2 layers there, and of course we'll do the same thing here for the other 2 entrances at the same time, just to keep things nice and easy. So again, fill those in, and that means that after this first layer of walls, we can have 2 layers of ceilings to connect these bits up with each other. And once again, of course, it means that we can do that for all 3 of the entrances, which should really help to make the shape ready here for the entrances. And the reason we have this little dip in is for if the gate opens, it doesn't really clip into anything. Here along the side, of course, we want to make sure that it looks nice, so we're going to have 1 or 2 quarter walls here to kind of fill in these gaps that we have over there, just so that it will look all perfectly smooth once we're done with it. So we want to have those gaps, and then take out our shallow sloped walls to fill in the final gaps here. And of course, it means that we can do this for every side and every gate that we have, so that there's no longer these gaps to be found. There we go. So this already gives a great sense of shape for all of these front entrances, but we're not quite there yet, of course. Here on the inside, we can kind of just start bringing up this wall all the way to the top, and we don't need to worry about the final layer. We can just keep filling in until you can't see the walls anymore. And we want to make sure that we do this all the way along the top, and then here, of course, just until it meets up with those ramps. And along the ramps, of course, we want to have our slope walls just following along with the shape. So that's how you fill in that side, and we can kind of just keep doing this for all of these different sides on the inside. At least the outside, of course, is going to be a little bit different. So first we'll finish this part here so that this entrance is well, pretty much complete to look at, and then we can of course keep this going for the other 2 entrances at the same time. So we just want to keep filling in all of these walls in the right place, and then at the slope walls here along the edge of the roof. And once more, we can continue this until we have all of these looking the same way. So again, we just want to follow the shape of the roofs of the building and follow them with the slope walls to finish this bit. There we go. And then of course we have one more entrance to do. So we just want to follow this until we do not see any more gaps here along the sides of these entrances. And then finally adding in the slope walls to complete it all. And then the final one here, we can also raise up these walls just like so and continue them all the way along to the front here. And then finally one more layer of the slope walls going along the sides, which already gives us a pretty good view of the front entrances, looking pretty finished over here. But of course we do have the sides to worry about. So over here we kind of want to continue these large walls with 3 more of them, so until they meet up with the rest of the shape of the building. And we want to keep filling in these parts as well before we add in the slope walls all the way along the sides here. Now of course we will know that this wall is a little bit higher. That doesn't matter. We will add a little layer of these ceilings along the edge, and we can do that all the way up to the corner because that's where we'll have something different. And then we can have these walls continue around this edge too. So it just adds a little bit more depth here to this side of the building. Of course also means we can do the same thing on the opposite side, again making sure we add 3 more large walls until they meet up with the shape of the build, and then we can fill in the remaining parts with the normal walls before we add in the slope walls going down the sides of these roofs, and adding in the ceilings across the very top here of the wall that we've just created. And then finally adding in the walls on top of those again, just to make sure we have that same amount of depth everywhere. And with that, we can safely say that we have the front entrance complete now. Depending on what the rest of your base looks like, we can, you know, have some paths going up to the rest of your base or different builds. Or you can just add a layer of stairs here around the front or around the sides, wherever you'd like to be able to walk on and off the little foundation that we have in front of the entrance. We need these foundations, of course, for the supports for everything that is hanging above it. Finally, what we want to do is add some beams here across the top of the walls that we have, just to add in a little bit more detail and depth all around the top of the base here. So we just want to make sure that we go all the way across and then all the way back over the side here. And then it's time to start focusing on the sides here. So we want to take out the large walls. We want to snap it right underneath the ceiling here. And after that, we can just make sure that we can connect the rest of this wall back into the foundation we have over here. Then on the front, we want to add one wall right there. And on the side again, we want to add 4 of them in total before we can add a large wall right above it, which should line up with the other wall on the other side. We can also add a large wall above this singular wall. So obviously that's going to be a lot shorter. From there, we want to take out a roof. So it's going up. We want to flip it around so that we can see this side before we connect it up to the building itself. Of course, the sides of this we want to fill in with our slope walls. Then above those slope walls, we want to place down some large walls so they go up for 4 high. And here at the front, we want to fill them in manually if you're using the bunker skin. So you can change one of the wall variants to a nice fan blowing and spinning around. And then we want to have a ceiling right over here on the top. Then we're actually going to extend this a little bit. So we want to have one wall there and another one here before we go into slope walls to bend back down into the building. We can, of course, have a roof over there and a ceiling on top of that bit. So that connects kind of back into the building. It gives a bit of depth here to the corner we've just created. And of course, we can actually do the same thing over here. So we want to have one wall here, then raise this up by 4 walls and also have 4 walls on the other sides. Have large walls right above these as well as above this one before we bring out a roof, flip it around, and then add the slope walls around the sides of it before adding large walls on top of that and 4 walls here on top of that roof. At the very top, we want to have 2 ceilings before we have a roof coming back down the sides. Have some slope walls here along the sides of this part of the build and some normal walls too, blending it all together and giving us another shape here to shape up the side of the base, which already helps a little bit. And obviously we're going to have to do the same thing here on the opposite side. So 1 wall on the front, 4 walls here on both sides, and of course the same thing over here. So 1 wall there, 4 walls over here and 4 walls over there. Large walls on top of these and on top of that one right there. And of course the same thing goes over here. So large wall there, and 1 here at the front. Then having the roof stick out here on the front for both of these, obviously. There we go. Fill in the sides with our slope walls again for both of them. Of course, large walls above those slope walls on both sides, and then 4 large walls on top of the roof we have. And the same thing once more over here. There we go. Then we have 2 ceilings on top and 2 ceilings on top of this before we have a roof that will go back down into the building itself. There we go. We can have our slope walls, of course, around the sides of that roof. And then finally we want to make sure that we fill in the last gap with these walls. There we go. And that should give us some of these supportive structures on the sides of our building. Then we want to take out those ceilings, and here we want to make sure that we add 5 of them, but we can also add 5 of them here on the top layer, and of course fill in the sides here with some walls and some beams going across the top. Over here on this side, we want to make sure that we do the same thing, going back towards where we have the rest of the building. So 5 ceilings there and 5 ceilings on top of it, filling in the walls between them and adding the beam across the final top layer. So we want to make sure that we have 2 of those beams meeting up in the middle, but of course still a gap because we haven't made that side entrance. Then we want to do the same thing here on the opposite side of the building. So 5 ceilings there, another 5 ceilings over here, and the same thing for these ones reaching towards each other. So we want to do the same thing here all the way across, and of course fill in between with the walls here on the outside, and finally adding a beam across the top layer here. There we go. Then here for these gaps, we want to raise up 4 walls in both corners. So just like this, we want to make sure that we raise up those walls 4 high. We can do the same thing over here before we add in some large walls on top of that, which should then meet up with the top layer we've just built before. So we'll do the same thing here, making sure that we have those large walls reaching all the way to the top of these wall segments. And then obviously on the other side, we want to do the same thing. First of all, raising these up by 4 in total on both corners of each section. There we go. And then again, adding in those large walls on top of them to meet up with the beams across the top of each of these sections, just like this. And then across the bottom, we want to have a few of our quarter walls connecting up those 2 layers. Again, doing the exact same thing over here. And of course, going across the other side of the building to make sure that we do the exact same thing here and the exact same thing on the other side too. There we go. Now for the windows, there's a few different options. If you're playing with mods, you might want to use ASR, so Architect Structures Remastered, to just add a window with those pieces. So you don't have to do anything, you don't have to use skins or whatsoever. If you don't have that mod and you're gonna be playing on official, of course, you could just use greenhouse glass walls instead. Or if you're gonna use a custom cosmetic, whether you're gonna use the bunker skin to change them into the window variant or any different skin, you can pretty much use whatever material you want as long as you remember where the windows goes. Just to make it easier and more clear, I'm going to use greenhouse glass so you can see exactly where the window is supposed to go. And above this little layer of these quarter walls, we want to have a 3x3 window, and we want to surround them with our beams across the bottom and the top, as well as the pillars along the sides, so that we have a very nice window shape before we add a layer of these little quarter walls right above them, so that we are once again on the equal lining with some of the other wall sections. And of course, we're going to have to do a few of these windows. So over here as well, we want to have a 3x3 window. We want to add in our pillars as well as our beams to kind of surround the windows by, and then finally add in our quarter walls above, so that everything is neatly connected up with each other. And of course, the other side of the build, we want to do the same thing. So we have these 3x3 windows. We'll have the exact same thing over here just to fill that all in. And then of course, adding the beams at the bottom at the top of those windows. Same thing over here at this side. There we go. And then adding in the pillars along the edges. And the same thing over here, making sure everything is nicely surrounded before adding in a layer of our quarter walls at the top, so everything is aligned once more. And we can do the exact same thing over here. And then for the rest of this, we want to have 3 more large walls in between to finish the rest of this wall segment. So we can just add those in, and you'll see that we'll finish that wall segment quite easily. We can do the same thing, of course, on the opposite side, and then once more for the final window over here, making sure that we have all of these wall sections easily finished. And then in front of these windows, we actually want to take out our ramps. 3 of them here, but we can actually expand them all the way to the edges, and then 1 further down, just like this. As for the front, you can either just have walls going down into the ground, or alternatively, you could have some foundations underneath them if it still allows you to snap them there. Depends on your landscape, of course, but just going down with walls could definitely work too. And then this corner, you'll have to fill in with a little shallow sloped wall just to give this a little bit more shape. We want to do the exact same thing right over here. So once again, we'll have these layers of our ramps coming down from the window along the side. We'll definitely want to fill that one in, and then if it lets you, you can either do walls or just have some foundations underneath them to fill in those final gaps and get a little bit more shape around those window segments. And of course, on the opposite side of the building, we'll do the exact same thing. So we'll start with adding in all of these ramps coming down from the windows. We can do the same thing over here on the opposite side, just to kind of blend it in together nicely. We can have those shallow walls here along the side, of course, and then again you can pick between just going down with some walls or filling in the gap with some foundations, depending on what your landscapes allows. And there we go, we have some nice additions here for all of these side windows, and as we can see, it already helps shaping up the outside walls of the bunker quite well. And now that we've done those windows, it's time to start to focus here on those side entrances. So first of all, here on the end, we want to make sure that we raise up these by 2 walls before we go into our roofs, and add 4 roofs in total going into the building like so. And above those, we want to make sure that we add some large walls to the end of them. And there we go. That gives us a bit of the shape that we'll need for the building. And then finally here we can have 2 ceilings, which is the same thing we've done for these other details before adding in a roof going back into the bunker itself. And of course we can have our slope walls along the sides of this. There we go. We can also have our walls right next to these parts, just so that they will all line up. And finally, have some large walls coming down from the sides here to make sure that those blend in with the other sides that we have. Then we can have a large wall right down that side. So from that ceiling, we can have a large wall going down. We can have the same thing here on the opposite side. And we can do the same thing on the inside. So there will be a gap of 1. But importantly is that those large walls are the same height for both of them. And of course, we want to make sure that we do the same thing on both sides of the building just to keep it easy. So we'll start with raising up these walls by 2. Going in by 4 roofs. And of course, also 4 roofs over here before adding in a large wall on top of that. Same over there. Add in 2 normal ceilings behind that. Same over there too. And adding in another roof going back into the building. Adding the slope walls underneath them. There we go. Adding a normal wall right there, just like this, before adding in the large walls here around the sides. There we go. And then we also want to have a large wall here and a large wall going down from there. There we go. And once we've done that, we can actually connect these sides up with each other. So we want to have a layer of ceilings there and another one coming above those, connecting them up with our walls between them. And of course, having the beam going across the top edge here, so that we kind of have that beam going all the way through from one side to the other. And of course, doing the same thing on the opposite side too. So once again, we want to make sure that we connect these layers and add a layer above it there and fill in those sides with our walls before adding in the beams across the very top of it. Now, underneath these ceilings, we want to add a layer of large walls coming down just like this to start filling in more of this wall segment. So we'll do the exact same thing over here on the side. There we go. We can go all the way across from one side to the other to start fill in this wall. As for this side of the building here, we can also start filling in walls, and we can just kind of fill it all in to meet up with the shape, obviously keeping in mind the actual shape of the building here, and finally adding in the slope walls on the side so that that is all ready to go. We'll go to the opposite wall here and make sure that we do the same thing right there. So just kind of following the shape and filling it all in until there's no more gaps. Same over here, just going all the way to the top there. We're not doing the inside just yet, but of course we are doing the same thing here on the opposite side of the building. So once again, we'll raise up these walls, following along with the existing shape so that we have no more gaps here on the outside walls at the very least. There we go, that's the one. And then the other side, of course, the same thing. We just want to follow this shape all the way along. There we go, until there's no more gaps to be found here. Then here in the middle at this edge, we want to have 3 pillars going up here, leave a gap of 3, and another 3 pillars right over there. So that's going to be one of the side entrances. And of course, we'll do the exact same thing over here, adding in these pillars just like so. We then want to take out our large metal cellar doors, change to the hangar doors once more, add one right over here and another one at the opposite side. Of course, should snap perfectly, especially if you have the foundations, because they always want to snap against those. Then we want to take out our large walls. We want to add 2 over here and 2 over there on the other side before filling in the top with a layer of our normal walls. And obviously we'll do the exact same thing on the opposite side, so 2 large walls on each side of this entrance and filling in the top with our normal walls in between them. And then to continue these side entrances, we want to take out our ramps again. We want to add 1 layer here at the top of this wall, sticking out like this, before adding in a layer of our quarter walls right above that. Again, just to make it stand out a little bit more. And then we can also have a layer of ceilings going back into the building, connecting all up again. So we just want to make sure that we fill this part in all the way to the very end, and then have a layer of beams going across the top part here. As for the inside, we want to take out our ramps again. We want to have 1 in this corner. We can have another one in that corner, leave a gap of 1 before we add another 2, and then another gap of 1 before we add some more. Then we can change to our roofs. We can add 2 roofs here, 2 roofs in the middle there, and then finally some more over there too. So kind of just filling in those gaps. We want to have some walls in between these sections. So we just want to make sure that we can add them in wherever we can fit it. It is a little bit of looking around, but we should be able to fill them all in. And then finally, of course, we can add in our slope walls to fill in the final gaps that we have between these. And this is just to add a little bit of extra detail and interest along the inside here of the builds, which I think works quite well in my opinion. I mean, I quite like the way that this looks right now. And of course, here along the inside, we want to make sure that we start one pillar down from the top, and we have 3 layers of these ramps coming out towards the front. So the same thing, of course, over here, before having some beams around the final end. But also we can have the beam going back to the inside of the building just as a nice statement piece, and we should be able to connect these parts up. So having a layer of walls around here, and then of course, if you weren't able to lower these foundations, you can just make sure that these walls go all the way into the ground themselves. You can also fill in the sides on this layer here, so a normal wall in those corners, some quarter walls right next to it, before we have some shallow slope walls all the way to fill in the remaining parts of the side here, which really will help shaping up the side of the building here. So finally, we want to make sure that we have one wall over there, and then we can start filling in the entirety here of the side of the building. Again, everything that's visible should be a wall before we fill in the final bits here with our slope wall pieces. And there we go, that fixes the entrance on that side. We just want to do the same thing over here on this side, making sure that all of the little gaps are filled in, and then finally at the slope walls to fix the remaining gaps. And there we go, we have a neat looking side entrance on this side of the building. Now of course we want to repeat a lot of that work on the other side too. So first of all, taking out our ramps, we'll add a layer here going across the top there. We also want to make sure that we bring out our ramps over here towards the front. So the same thing over there once more, making sure that those are all in place. Adding those beams across the front, as well as these going back into the building. There we go. Same thing over here, making sure that they will go attach back in to our main building. And of course we can fill in the walls down below here. There we go, fill in that corner bit, some quarter walls on both sides, and then some shallow slope walls to fill in those remaining parts quite easily. Then of course over here also on the top, we want to have a layer of our quarter walls going across from one side to the other. There we go. And then of course on top of here, we want to make sure that we fill in all of the ceilings all the way across. There we go. We want to fill in these walls so that we no longer have any remaining gaps, and then fill in the slope walls finally, of course, to finish that. And then the same can be done right over here. So we want to just be sure to fill it all in, and then add our slope walls to those remaining gaps, just like this. Here at the top, we want to add in a layer of beams going across, of course. And then finally, we want to add a few more details here. So some of these ramps in these sections. There we go. And then finally, in between, we want to be sure to add in all roof pieces. There we go. Then we also want to make sure that we add in a few of these walls in the right spots, so that we can just be sure that there's no gaps left after all this. There we go. And then of course we'll want to fill in the remaining pieces with our sloped walls, so that we no longer have any of the gaps in here. There we go. That is looking quite nice and gives us another entrance. Obviously, down here, we can be sure to add in a few stairs in between so that you can also reach the ground. And of course, the same can be done on the other side. For me, it kind of runs into the water where I've built the tutorial. But yeah, depends on your landscape, of course. Okay, so now we've done the outside of this side entrance. We also want to focus a little bit here on the inside. So first of all, here, these two walls, we just want to make sure that we raise them all the way up. And we can do the same thing over here on the opposite side, just so that is completed like so. Then we also want to bring out some large walls, 3 of them right over here in this shape, and the same shape we can make right over here, which is going to help us form some kind of entrance over here. Then we want to take out some slope walls. We want to add them right here just to blend these together a little bit, and we can also do them here across the bottom. So we're basically forming a little bit of an entrance to this place. Then we can take out our roofs, add them over here as well as on top of there. And then here in between, we want to add 3 ceilings just like this. Then we can have some roofs right in those places. And then in between them, we want to add in some slopes, some ramps. Instead, we want to have some slope walls, of course, to fill in these sides. There we go. Just to add a little bit of more shape and details to this place. And if we want to, you can leave it as is in here, but we can also add a few extra details in there just to spice it up, spruce it up a little bit more. If you want to do that, we want to add in some slopes, some ramps right here. So the middle one, and then leaving a gap of 1 to each side before we fill in the rest, where we can use some roofs just to kind of shape this up a little bit more, filling in those gaps like that. And then of course in between, we would want to have some of these shallow slope walls to fill in the gaps and make sure that they're all connected up again. Of course, we can also fill in these sides and then kind of just connect it all up to each other, so there's no longer any visible gaps, which is of course exactly what you would want for these. So we can just kind of fill in the entire side of those, which just makes this part a little bit more interesting to look at and provide you with a pretty nice side entrance. So we'll do the same bits of work over here. So first of all, of course, raising up these walls to make sure that those are all filled in, and then the same thing over here. Then adding all large walls in such a shape like this. Same over there. Adding in some slope walls to shape up this part of the building a little bit and making this a proper entrance to work towards. We can have our roofs over here as well as up there, and of course adding in a layer of ceilings there. And then finally we can of course once again add in these roofs, so we can have roofs in those spots as well as in these right here. And then for all the other ones, of course, that's where we add in a few of our ramps like so. And then the same thing in here, just making sure that we add those ramps in for a bit more shape to it all. We can have our slope walls here off to the sides to fill in those gaps, and then the shallow ones right over here to fill in these gaps. There we go. And of course continue that for all these sides, just so that we no longer have any like visual gaps anywhere. That's the main goal of this. There we go. Final one. And we're ready. So now the side entrances look a little bit more special. So now it's time to finish the rest of the shape. So we want to have one ceiling over here before we go into some roofs. And these roofs we can follow all the way down along the side of the building here. And of course, finally here we can, well, you can just have a wall connecting to the ground, or you can just kind of slope it all the way down into the ground. Kind of depends on what your landscape does, as well as what it allows with your slope walls. So ending it in a foundation is usually the most easy and most natural way to end the entirety of this building. Then for the rest of the side here, what we want to do is just kind of fill in this side like so. So bringing across a support with our slope walls, and then of course finally here we want to have a normal wall and another ceiling, and we can also have that final beam here. Now for the inside here, this also means that we can have our roofs over there, just to make sure that this beam feels like a proper support there, and it kind of helps shape up the whole side of this base. It also means that from that ceiling down there we can snap a large wall just to kind of fill in the side. Now if you want to, you can definitely add another window in here, so we can do the same kind of pattern just to fill in the final bit, or you can just fill it in all as one major wall. So it's kind of up to what you prefer. If you want some extra light in there, of course you can go for just filling in this wall just the same as we did with the window. So we're going to have a 3x3 window once again, fill in the top and bottom with our beams, have our pillars going along the sides, and of course, to make it match up again, some quarter walls around the top before we can fill in the remaining parts here of this entire wall piece. Actually, for this inside, it can be important to raise them up just a little bit higher so that they will match up with the rest of the shape and we won't have any gaps. And then, of course, finally, we can add in those slope walls there so there won't be any visual gaps whatsoever. For the outside, it also means that we can continue the same kind of detail we've had before around the windows, just to kind of slope off the sides. Of course, this final one you probably want to leave out because, well, that's going to kind of clip into each other. So we just want to have these. Of course, we can have that shallow slope wall around the sides here, as well as this. We can actually fill in some quarter pieces, and depending on what the landscape allows, either some walls underneath or of course the foundations, just to make sure that this is not floating and has been properly filled in. But yeah, there we go. It's a nice addition, nice final bit of our bunker. Gives it a nice shape to it all, which of course we want to repeat here on the other side. So we can have the two ceilings here, we can have the wall as well as the beam across the very top. Then of course we can take out our roofs. First of all, we can bring this roof all the way across until the very last one. We can have that final piece here. We can have our slope walls continuing back up around the sides of the whole build. There we go. And of course, another layer of roofs to make sure that this is a proper supportive beam. There we go. Then over here we can have our 4 walls. We can also have our large wall coming down from that corner. We can have our 6 quarter walls over here so that we can build our 3x3 window so we can enjoy the views. We can of course have the beam across the top and bottom, as well as the pillars along the sides there, before we start filling in the remaining parts of this wall. We want to, of course, have our quarter walls right above here and continue to fill in these last parts. Then, of course, we go back to the other side just so that we can make sure that we fill in all of these final pieces and blend in nicely with the shape of the roof. There we go. And that kind of rounds off the final edge here of the bunker. And then, of course, once again, we can add in our ramps here just to make sure that we have that same bit of detail along the sides here, all the way to the very end. We can also, of course, add in our shallow sloped walls here. There we are, some quarter walls, and then continue down with either walls or, of course, our foundations, just to make sure that this is all no longer floating. And there we go. We finished the entire side of the bunker. Now it's time to make sure that the inside looks nice, as well as, of course, adding the roof. So first of all, along the inside here, we of course want to work out these gaps that we have in the walls. So we want to raise up these walls by 2 in this kind of shape so that we can make some proper supports along these sides. We can do the same thing over here, creating that same shape but blending it in with that side entrance. Again, doing the same thing over here. And then for the front, we'll just wait a moment because they will be slightly different. So first of all, we want to build all these, but from this pillar we want to leave a gap of 7 foundations before we build a little pillar like this, which should line up with the pillar that we had at the front. And of course, we can continue to do this with every other pillar that we also have along the sides, which also means that there's 7 between these pillars. But of course, those over here will be slightly closer. There will only be a gap of 5 between these, and we want to raise them up with 2 high at the same time, so those all are the same height. And we can of course continue to do so for all these other sections too. So here again, lining it up with the one at the front, we want to make sure that we raise them up by 2 high. Again, all on the same line, all the way over here to the final side of the opposite wall of the building. And then we can of course continue to do the same here too, kind of making sure that we get a little bit of the supports and infrastructure here on the inside of our building in the right places. So there we go, and keep raising these all up to be 2 high. So now we have a few of these pillars ready, except for the ones at the front, just to kind of shape up the inside building. Then what we want to do is take out all large walls, and we want to make sure that we add them on top of these 2 that we have right now. So this is going to raise them up quite a bit here on the inside. We also want to make sure that we still have that large wall going up to the same height, because we can still see a part of it, of course. So we just want to make sure that we add these in so that we have those supportive beams in place. We can do the same thing here, of course, for all of these pillars. So we just want to make sure that we raise them up with our large walls, which of course is going to mean that all of these pillars will be 6 high in total. So we just want to make sure that we add them all in the right spots, raise them up just like this, and of course continue doing that for all of the different ones, which already will see you kind of shape up the hangar, the bunker, in different, well, not necessarily rooms of course, but at least like different spaces, and it will make sure that it actually looks like this bunker is being properly supported rather than being all open. If you really wanted to, of course, you could leave all the middle ones out, which will give yourself a little bit more space on the inside, I suppose, if you really wanted to. But I think it definitely adds the nice touch to the place and makes it look like a proper industrial bunker on the inside at the same time. So now that we've done that, we want to take out our roofs and we want to make sure that they stick out to the inside just like this on the end. We want to do the same thing here on these ends, just because then we can make them actually look like supports. We can also do it on the opposite side because of course these pillars in the middle will be supporting to both sides. So we can just make sure that we add these all in. There we go. And we want to make sure that we do that at the end of each of these pillars that we've worked on. And then next step, of course, is to add in our slope walls along the sides of them, making sure that we can build them up to the roof of the base that we're building. There we go. Just making sure we got all of the supports in place. There we go. Just a few more. And then the final two over here. Awesome. Then of course we need to fill in some walls. We want to make them 3 high at the back and 2 high above the slope walls, so they'll meet up with the shapes we already made on top of the bunker. So that is the sides that we now want to fill in so that we have those supports all the way complete to the top. And we can do the same thing over here. So the middle one we can raise it by 3 and the other ones we can raise up by 2. And these will be all supportive, well, pillars inside of our bunker. There we go. Of course, at the same time, we can also make sure that we raise up these final bits so that the whole support is ready to go. And we want to do that for all of them. So we're just going to go around and make sure that all of these supports are now completely filled in and basically ready to hold up the roof over the top of the bunker, which is the final bit that we'll add. But first, of course, we'll need to make sure that all these supports are in place, and as well the entrances are fixed, because now, of course, as long as we don't have a roof, it's a lot easier to see inside because we have all the natural light, although a decent amount of natural light will still be available on the inside once we're done. But for now, we'll just enjoy still not having a proper roof on top of it. There we go. We want to raise this up, raise up these sides, and finally this one as well. And then the final support should already help transform the look of this bunker. And you can see now the inside already starts to feel much more like a nice brutalist structure with you know, a strong feeling interior. Oh, I forgot a few walls. Let's make sure that we add those in the right places, of course, so that everything is supported. So for the next part, we're looking at these entrances because, well, we still have some weird bits here that we want to fix before we do anything else. So from this gap here on this side, we want to raise up this wall to be 2 high, but we'll have it come out by 2 instead of just the 1. We can, of course, go around the corner and then go in by 1 more before we fill in the sides just like this. For here in the middle, well, first of all, we want to make sure that we place down this shape. We can do the same thing over here at the opposite side. Then we want to bring this out by just the one, raise them all up by 2, go across this 3 wide, and then connect it back round the side. So we want to make sure that we have that kind of shape coming out of this front support. We'll do the same thing over here. So have these walls come down, then we'll bring it out on both sides, and then we'll start wrapping it around so that we have the 3 wide one here. And of course everything is going to be too high. The same we can do over here. We can bring this out from the side, we can fill this in, wrap around, and finally add those last additions. Then here from the front, we actually want to take out our ramps. We can start to fill in the actual entrance. So we just want to build a ramp going up to those ceilings over there so that we can walk in and out of our base, and we can do that for all of these sections that we've just built. So we just want to make sure that we fill them all in, and at least that should leave no more gaps along the bottom of the front entrances, which is already a start of finished building this area. Then above these, we want to actually raise up our large walls. So we're just going to add a large wall on top of each and every one of these, just like this, to make sure that we get some more height in. So it's in fact pretty similar to the other supportive beams, pillars we've just made. Just a slightly different shape here on the front, but yeah, by just raising these up with the large walls, we'll be one step closer to getting the whole shape done. There we go. We can fill in these parts and finally add those in there. You can already see the entrance starting to take proper shape now. But we have a few last one left to fill in, so we want to just make sure that we add in all of those so that we now have the majority of the shape in place. And apparently we're getting a little drop mid-tutorial, always nice. Then of course we can take out our roofs here. We can make sure they go towards each other above each of these entrances to make sure that we keep that familiar shape that we've had everywhere else before. And we can raise up these to be too high, so again that will reach up until the ceiling. We can do that for all the different sides, and then here along this side we just want to fill it all in. Also along this side over here we want to just make sure that we fill the entirety in with our walls. We can continue to do so all the way for each of these different sections, and there we are. We filled it all in, and of course then we need to start taking out our slope walls to add them along the sides of these roof pieces as the drop lands and opens up. But there we go, that's filling in a majority of the basic shape. Now we want to take out our beams, and here along the side of the entrance we want to make sure that we raise them above those walls we have along the sides here. So we want to make sure to fill those all in, and above those we actually want to raise this up by 2. So above the beam we want a 2x2 wall raising up, so not quite all the way to the top, but just a little bit higher. There we go. And then finally after that we can have some ramps going up to the top layer. We can do the same thing over here. There we go, which kind of blends in the entrance here at the front. We can of course do that for each section here, so we want to make sure that we raise up those as well with the ramps, and then finally adding them here along the very front too. There we go, we don't need that one. And then finally all we need to do is fill in these sides with the walls to the top so that the supports are completed. And of course, we want to make sure that we do that for each of these sections so that the supports right at the entrance are all in a proper state. There we go. The final one over here. And with that, we have all of our supports in place, and it's time to start shape up the roof and fill that all in. So in order to start filling in the top layer, the best part is to start in the top of this beam in the middle. So basically the ones next to the middle entrance. And first of all, we want to start bringing this most of the way across the building, which will go over the top of some of these supportive pillars that we've built. But it will give us a few reference points to work with, and we want to build right up till the end here, where we can go around to the side and make sure that it lines up with one of these supports on the outside, on the sides of the building. We want to make sure that we do this all the way across to the other end as well. And then of course here in the middle, we can make sure that this one also is going back all the way to that front support, just so that we get a few reference lines that we can work with for some of the additions that we'll have here on the top layer of the building, obviously, because it's not just going to be a flat roof all the way throughout. Then we also want to add a beam going across this one. So the first layer here on the front, where we have these supports reach out on top of the building, we also want to make sure that we can fill those in all the way across from one side to the other, just so that we get another reference line. So here at the front, we want to find the point where they cross. That's where we want to add in a ramp, and then we want to actually make sure that we have 4 ramps in total going up. We can do the same thing here on the other cross section. There we go. So again, this is starting from the front entrance where we've done this. Then we can go here at the back where they cross, and then once again we can be sure to add 4 ramps going up the same direction, and then again 4 more right over here. Finally, what we want to start doing is start filling in these sides. So first of all, our shallow slope walls, we can do the exact same thing here on the opposite side, making sure we fill them in. We can start doing the same here on the front of the building, of course, making sure that we get those slope walls in place. And on the opposite side here, we want to make sure that we do the exact same thing, just so that we can get a proper shape in here for some of the details that we'll be adding on the top of our bunker. So we'll just start with adding all of these sloped walls in. Then we can take out our quarter walls. We want to add 2 of them here and 2 of them at the top layer there, and of course that goes for both sides, and all 4 of these sections that we have. So we want to fill those in, and we want to fill them in over here at the same time. There we go. Fill those all in, just so that we can well, finish these extra supports for the shape on top of the building. Once we've done that, we can actually take out our walls. First of all, we can take a wall all the way across from one side to the other here. Trying not to misplace as much as I've done. And then we can add another layer in between to kind of finish off this wall on the inside. And of course, on the opposite side here, we're going to be doing the exact same thing, kind of connecting these 2 shapes we've just built. There we go. And then the final layer, of course, is adding a ceiling at the very top to connect those different ramps with each other. Once we've done that, of course, we can do the exact same thing here over at the opposite side. So also here, we want to make sure that we fill in the walls between these 2 sections to add this shape to the top of our bunker, and we can do the same thing here on the other side, filling it in all the way across from one end to the other, just like so. And of course, also over here, we want to be sure to add in these ceilings all the way across like that. So between those 2 new walls we've created, we of course have a few of these supports. We want to make sure that we raise them up by 1 extra layer of walls, just so that they'll meet the new ceiling. So just those we want to raise up a little bit. Then we can take out our ramps again. We can go in by 1 from those cross-section lines that we have. We can build in our ramps going all the way across, and then raise this up by 3 ramps high in total, just going all the way and filling that in like this. Then of course we can go over to the other side and start doing the same thing over here. So again, raising these all up by 3 high in total. There we go, all the way across from one side to another. There we go. And before we start filling in this layer in the middle, we want to take out some quarter walls, and we raise these up just that little bit more, so they will actually meet up with the roof that we're about to add in. There we go. So just want to add these quarter walls on top all of these. First of all, we want to start filling in these ceilings up to these supports. So this is a layer of 3 ceilings going all the way across the front here. We can also make sure that we bring across these sides, and then we can do the same thing over at this end, filling in the first 3 layers with our ceilings just as is, and of course continue to fill in these sides all the way. We're going to keep some space here for a window in the middle. So what we want to do, so from these supports we want to add 1 more layer going all the way across on both sides, and we want to make sure that we have a 2 wide space around the sides of this. Then we can take out our beams and make sure that we surround this space with them before we add in the skylight. And just as with the other windows, you can use whatever you've got available. So you can use a mod that has glass. If you want to use a skin, you can use pretty much any material and then just skin it into a window. But just to make it clear where the windows are going, I'm going to be using the greenhouse glass here. So this is going to be the middle central skylight here, which of course will offer a bunch of light into your base. And now that we've done that, we've got the central little hill of the bunker done, and we want to start filling in the rest of it. Here the front of the build is actually quite simple. We just want to start filling in everything in front of this cross-section line back all the way to the front entrance in with our ceilings, so we can just kind of cover over everything that is underneath here. We don't need to do anything else with that, and then we can at least get started on filling in the front of the building here, which is going to be adding a bunch of ceilings, of course, which I mean, it's not the hardest work, so it's quite easy to do. And once we've done that, it does mean that should you ever need more space to work with, you can technically just come up here and you'll have a decent amount of room on top of your bunker too. Of course, you'll have to keep an eye out on things because, you know, might not necessarily be the safest place, but you'll have a lot of room on top of here. So if you need to do any more breeding, which you can't fit inside for some reason, yeah, the added bonus is that you have plenty of space available on the top of the build. But first, we'll need to actually fill that all in. So for now, we're just following that shape we've built, the whole bunker we've created, to make sure that we get a nice roof on there so that we can feel safe inside. So for now, we'll just continue to fill it all in. So that's the front section done, as well as well, the middle section of the roof. And the first step we want to do is fill in these connecting lines from the side supports that we have, just as a few reference points. It's going to make it a lot easier to know where these lines are when we add a few more additional details, of course. So first of all, we want to fill in these all the way across. And for a good rule, we can also just fill in anything between these supports. So here along the sideline, we want to just kind of take this supportive beam and go all the way across, which also means that we can have a layer of one over here on this side, all the way to the back of the building, just to fill it all in. And here again, from these supports that we have, we want to fill in the sides. So we just have 3 big gaps left here, but we also of course want to do the same thing over here on this side of the building. So again, between these supportive pillars that we've built on the inside, we just want to fill in the ceilings across the top. And of course, same here, we can have this one line all the way across from the front to the back of the build. There we go. So again, we should have 3 gaps on all of the different sides. Now, first of all, we want to line out a 5x5 gap here. So what we want to do for this middle gap is add a line here and add another line right over there, which should already be a 5x5 gap, which we can then circle around with our beams. So again, should be a 5x5 gap, which is a pretty decent size, of course, which will turn into a nice entry point. So we'll do the same thing over here, add one line of ceilings here, another one over there, which should give us a 5x5 shape. So again, we can add our beams around the edges of this, making sure we've completely circled around it. And then we can take out our metal behemoth cellar doors. There we go. We can of course change them to these cellar doors and add them in. And this is just so that we have an access point into a base should we need it. Should you need to fly in, drop in anything, you have some easy access points over here. And of course, we don't only want that on one side, we actually want that on both sides. So we want to make sure that we have those large behemoth cellar doors actually on both sides of the building. Once we've done that, we can focus on these other sections. And what we want to do over here is basically circle around with a layer of ceilings all the way around the edges here, which should leave us with a 3x3 space, which we can then circle around with our beams and fill in with our windows so that we have another bit of skylight there. And we'll do the exact same thing for the remaining gaps that we have. So again, over here, we want to circle around with our ceilings and then go around with our beams to create a nice skylight here. And finally, of course, add our glass inside so that it is neatly filled in. Then we want to go over to the other side and continue that process. So once again, we want to go circle around the edges here with our ceilings. We want to add our beam around the edges of everything and then fill in the insides here with our glass, just like that. And then one final one over here where we can go around the edges, filling in all of those ceilings, then going across the inside line here with some beams. And then the skylight should be 3x3 and we can just fill it all in with our glass, which should give us the entire roof of our bunker base, except for, of course, the final bit towards the end. For this backside, we want to first of all add in those beams going around this corner that we've created. So we want to keep that the same part for all of this. And then we want to take out our roofs, because we can actually just start filling in the back here with our roofs coming down from the edge. And well, we can make it meet up all the way with the edge here, or you can continue it all the way into the ground just to kind of smooth it out. Because, well, my idea with this original design, this is also the way I skinned it, is to try and turn a lot of the bunker into a natural hill. That's why I would recommend using either the cozy cabin skin or deluxe dream house or any other skin that provides you with a grass texture, so that you skin the roofs to look like grass. You could also do it with thatch and paint it, but then of course thatch isn't very strong, so I'm not sure if you want to build the whole base out of a thatch roof. Probably not the most ideal or secure location that way, but it is definitely an option, depending on what kind of settings you play on. Of course, it might be wise or a stupid decision. So we can fill in that first side like this. We can do the same thing over here. So we just want to bring down these roofs all the way. And then once again, the right side, we can also just fill in completely. For the middle, we're going to do a few additions, but for this back, we just want to make sure that we fill this all in so that we get a nice hill coming down from the top layer there. There we go. So we can just start filling in this entire roof for the final layer of a bunker, which yeah, should definitely serve you well if you enjoy breeding. As you can see, we have a pretty sizable space in here, which is always great to use, especially if you're keen on breeding some of those bigger creatures. So here at the middle layer, first of all, we want to fill in a layer all the way across the edge here, as well as the first layer on top of the ceilings. We then also want to fill in the first layer here across the very top, and we can go across the side here. We'll do the same thing over there. Then here on the top, we want to make sure that we have at least 2 layers of roofs, and we can do the same thing on the bottom, and we're counting, of course, from the foundations themselves. Then we can add 1 more layer here on the right side, 1 more layer here on the left. We can add in some beams here across the bottom and the top layer, and then we can add 1 more skylight, again using whatever window materials or skins you're using, to make sure that we get a bit more light also here from the back of the base. Now that we have the entire roof available, we still have these gaps along the sides. To fill those in, actually quite easy. What I would do is add 2 layers of ramps all the way across these sides just to fill in those gaps, because it looks quite nice. You know, you add a little bit more shape to the bunker at the same time, and yeah, it's a pretty nice way to connect it all up. Of course, you could leave it as is, but just looks a little bit nicer having these ramps all the way the edges. We can't, of course, add them at the back, but we don't really need them because there's no gaps there. And of course, we want to do the same thing for both sides of the build. So we just want to make sure that we connect all of these up with all ramps, which should fit perfectly, of course. And again, just kind of blends those sides together a bit more, give them a little bit more shape to use. And then once we've done that, we should be completely done with the build. Then with that, we've got the entire bunker looking awesome and ready for all of your breeding projects. But you can definitely, of course, take it to the next level by making sure that we skin it all. And you can skin it, of course, in many different ways with many different cosmetics, whatever you prefer yourself. The thing I would recommend is for most of the roof, change it to a grass looking skin. So you can use cozy cabins, then you get this kind of grass texture, which looks pretty cool indeed. Or you can use deluxe dream house. That's got a few different options. You've got some grass options in there, but you also have this hedge skin, which makes it a little bit thicker, more overgrown, which is actually a quite nice texture. Plus the advantage is that this looks the same on the inside as well as the outside. So on the inside you'll also still get a little bit of that greenery poking through, which I personally quite like indeed. Then for the majority of the rest of the base, we want to skin it with the bunker structure skins, or at least that's what I've done. You can definitely feel free to change this out for different cosmetics, but yeah, that's how you get this bunker look. If you're wondering about my windows, I've used ASR, so Architect Structures Remastered. It isn't a cosmetic, so you can't use it on official. It will have to be installed on your single player or on the server you're playing on. And that's how you want to skin the majority of the bunker. In a few places, I've changed the variants to get these nice fans. I've done that on the front there, as well as some of these side bits. Bunker also has a very nice window skin, by the way, so you can also definitely use that to skin your windows and get some really nice looks. Everything you see here with this darker metal texture, that's from the new sci-fi cosmetics, the EGM sci-fi skins, which are definitely really cool and fit the bunker aesthetic quite perfectly. You can get all of these different textures from that cosmetics. They also have these fan skins that you can add to your build. You can add a few of the variants, as you can see, for these metal structures to really make the bunker shine. But without them, as I said, there's a lot of options to do so. What I did do using these sci-fi skins is add a few of these extra fans above the windows. Definitely an optional addition, not needed for the build per se, but it's just a nice little addition if you're using these skins. So that's how you would skin the side of the building. The front is pretty straightforward, again mostly using the bunker skins, adding these fans on those corner pieces, and then we have the slightly different variant here for the bunker along the sides of the entrance. The entrance itself is the bunker skin, and then above it, once again, using those sci-fi skins to get these really cool metal looks, which I think blend together absolutely perfectly. And then of course the other side of the bunker is exactly the same as the first. For the inside, I've actually skinned the bottom two layers with those metal skins, as well as these ramps going back down into the building. And we've added a bunch of these sci-fi skins at the top layer. So everything above the large wall in the pillars is again using those sci-fi skins. You can see they've got some really cool patterns, so you can make some nice detailed walls out of those simple supports that we've built before. And that's kind of what I did for the entire top layer of all of these different walls. You can also see how nice it looks on those side bits we made, especially adding in a bunch of the fans also here on the inside. So again, yeah, I would definitely suggest getting the sci-fi skin, but it is actually a freemium. You can use all the utilities of it for free, I think, but the rest of the skin, so if you want this darker metal look, you will need to purchase the skin. The same goes for the bunker skin that I've used, which is a premium skin. Of course, as I said, it's quite easy to swap out cosmetics for a different look if you want to go for a different skin that you do own. We've got a little of the metal also below the windows, and the first two layers of the pillars are also the metal skins. But more importantly, you can see it easily fits the Bronto. I designed it here for the new Evo Bronto from the Paleo ARK team, which of course is a much improved Bronto, but just for reference, you can also easily fit in a normal Bronto. And as I said, I built it inside a cliff or at the back, so I didn't build the back myself, which allows me to basically park even more things because I can back them up way further and I won't have to worry about the back of the building. So the structure limit also is a little bit more forgiving, of course. But yeah, that is how you bring this entire thing together. We have the skylights, etc., of course, in place. And yeah, it just makes for a really cool base with a lot of space. You can see the gigas here easily fit inside. You could have a bunch of them here quite easily. And with those supports and everything, it feels like a proper bunker. It looks like a proper bunker. And for your breeding projects, it's going to be absolutely perfect. And you'll have a lot of space available to you for whatever you are working on. And then, of course, here at the top, you have even more space should you ever need it. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and feel free to leave your suggestions for future builds you want to see next down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the build tutorial, and I will hope to see you around for the next video or the next stream. Until that time, goodbye.